My fiancé is having an affair with my best friend and my family helped them hide it. I played dumb until the wedding day, which is when I humiliated them all. After finding the secret group chat which they all used to hide the affair, I scrolled to the top to see when it was formed, which happened to be 18 months ago. My mom did shame them at first in fairness to her, but just a few days later she asked my fiancé Alex if he truly loved my best friend Peach. He said he was absolutely sure but that he also loved me too. That's when my half-sister Maria and half-brother Richard offered that Alex tried to convince me to be in an open relationship. By the way, at this point, he and I were already engaged. Alex mentioned to them all that he thinks our relationship seemed too far deep to try to bring it up. Well, my mom Angie literally offered to cover for Alex and Peach until he felt ready to bring up an open relationship to me. As I was reading, all I could think was how in the actual F could my family betray me like that? I honestly wanted to vomit. However, I was just taking screenshot after screenshot. The more I read down, I found out that Peach took my spot on our previous family trip. I got a really bad stomach bug a while ago that caused me not to go. I can't even begin to imagine what they did on the trip. And the fact my mother was okay with all of this, I think is what hurts the most. The fact she's known for way over a whole year, that my fiancé was cheating on me. A few days after finding out, I had a moment of weakness and ended up sending the screenshots to Alex's parents and explained the whole deal to them. They called rather quickly. They asked me if Elle had any hard proof of them cheating besides the group chat and claims about the provocative pictures. They asked for more screenshots and I just basically sent them a good chunk of them. His mother made me feel so awful for sending them. She was sobbing and apologizing for her son. She soon became inconsolable. His father took the phone and asked if there was anything his son could do to make it up to me. I was offended that he asked that. I asked him if I could be frank and told him that unless his son could shrivel up and disappear, then there wasn't anything really he could say. His father said that he understood. I asked him if they could keep this to themselves until I brought it up to Alex. They said they could. And we ended the call. For a while, I thought vomiting from stress was rare. But it finally happened. Alex heard me vomiting and tried to rub my back. I held my hand up and cleaned myself up. He had concern in his voice and was asking if I was okay. For once, I actually saw nothing but red. Yet I kept the composure. Later that day, I started getting ready for the rehearsal dinner. Alex told me he had to get some things done before heading to the restaurant. I told him that was fine and that I'd see him later. Before he left, he said he loved me. And this was one of the days he was excited for. I said me too, trying not to have much rage behind it. Once he left, I gathered all the screenshots. For some people that don't know, you can schedule text messages to be sent out at a certain time. I decided to do this to send all the screenshots of everything to everyone. Peach's family, our friend groups, his family as well as mine. I sent it to go out at 1:25 p.m. This would be the halfway point of the dinner and people would be dropping off gifts early for us. I gathered the black hole of stress forming in me and headed to the restaurant when it was time. My mother and her husband were already there. My mother hugged me and all I could do was stand there. To feel her hands on me almost felt like she was personally violating my spirit. I did a quick tap hug so she wouldn't get suspicious and we headed inside. Guests started flowing in and everyone was surprisingly on time. Once everyone was gathered, Alex went on this whole spiel of how he was happy everyone could come and that he was excited for his family for the next dinner. He mentioned how I was the love of his life and how he was so happy our families would mingle and we could be one. I wanted to ask him how dare he say that, but nothing but fake smiles and nods from me. Peach was basically looking like a clueless dog and smiling right along and clapping for us. To see this happen in real life is truly mind-boggling. The lengths people will go to have their cake and eat it too. I could barely eat as the stress was getting to me so badly. At the time, I set for the messages. People's phones started buzzing and Alex's and Peach's phones were blowing up. I would like to admit that for once, a genuine smile crept on my face. It was like watching an entire kingdom crumble and fall. The horrified faces of Peach and Alex when they looked at me was golden. It's the one highlight I will hold onto from this emotional day. My aunt went ballistic. She started calling my mom a cruel heartless bitch, over and over. My mother hurriedly checked her phone and saw I sent near the screenshots. She started screaming and becoming irate, saying I was really trying to ruin her life again. My grandparents' reaction hurt the most because they started screaming at my mother. My grandmother was trying, with a few of our other guests, to hold my aunt back as she started screaming every expletive she could. My grandfather was screaming at my mother that he didn't raise her. At this point, everyone is screaming and crying hysterics. My other bridesmaids were cursing Peach out and calling her names. I hate to admit it, but I took joy in that. My grandfather went on to scream at Alex. I just started laughing and sobbing. I had so much emotions that I genuinely think my body didn't know what to do, so it did everything. The tears just kept coming. My cousin escorted me outside as fast as she could with Alex chasing us down. He kept screaming my name and begging to talk. I ignored him and my cousin was pushing him away from her car so she could get in and drive off. She took me to my aunt's house and told me to stay there and not answer the door for anyone. I kind of felt like a kid being left at home alone. I didn't, and just sat on the floor. That's when I just started bawling. All the emotions I'll have kept pent up throughout just finally came up. After about another hour, my aunt and cousin came back home. They hugged me for like a good 5 minutes. When we finally broke off, I noticed my aunt had a few scratches on her. I'm assuming they couldn't hold my aunt back from my mom for much longer. My aunt caught me up on everything. Apparently after my cousin drove off with me, Alex came back in and started screaming at Peach for ruining everything. They got into a screaming match and some of our friends were trying to split them apart. My grandparents, aunt, and Tony, my mom's husband, were drilling into my mother for answers. Tony was the most livid. Apparently during the family trip I couldn't go to. My mom told Tony that I had offered my ticket to Peach so she could enjoy a nice break for herself. Tony at this point is screaming and reading some of her messages out loud. She was begging him to stop and that she could explain. My aunt started adding on that she better start explaining because all she sees is a worthless mother and vile person. Apparently this set my mother off and she started screaming about how she hated me. About how I ruined her life and made it difficult. How she felt like she could never be happy because I was always a constant reminder of her biggest mistake ever and she regretted not terminating me when she had the chance. That set my aunt off and she basically pounced on her. For context, my aunt is infertile. In her words, I was the daughter she never got to have. So in her mind, she went full mama bear mode on my birth giver. That's what I'm calling my mom now. To make a long list short, Tony is divorcing my mom. He's had suspicions for a few months she's cheating again and these suspicions of his turned out to be true. Peach exposed Alex's text to her that he was sleeping with her because he always thought she was prettier and he didn't know how to bring it up to me. Peach's father spammed her with calls and will be cutting her off financially. Apparently this is my fault and I'm an evil witch for ruining her according to her texts. My mother has been on a tirade with our family exclaiming I'm an evil person for destroying her world again. Half-siblings felt it wasn't their place to say anything to me and that I should have expected Alex to look elsewhere because men aren't monogamous and people love who they love. Love been getting texting calls from everyone. My aunt offered for me to stay with her until I get out of this jumbled mess. I accepted it seeing as I have no intention of going back to that apartment. I've already emailed my landlord and will be handling it all next week. My boss emailed me back and said I was allowed to use some PTO for as long as I need. I will definitely take it seeing as I'm highly considering moving somewhere quiet and peaceful. I thought things were pretty much settled by this point but I was very much incorrect as things have escalated heavily. The day after I just described, I woke up and took a long hot shower and turned my phone on. I couldn't even unlock it or clear notification before I got a call from one of my bridesmaids. I answered and she immediately started screaming at me about how I could ignore Peach and Alex in their time of need. At first I was confused, seeing as I don't give a damn about them anymore. I asked her to not yell at me, but she continued anyway. She screamed that Peach hurt herself. I really wanted to scoff on the phone because at this point I know she was doing it to rally people on her side since I won't respond to her text. Yet she also told me Alex tried to take his life too. His friends found him at my apartment all groggy. They took him to the hospital where he was cleared since they didn't have to pump. They are keeping him on watch for the next 72 hours. After this, my friend group has been split very heavily since I didn't respond to either of them before they did this. I still have no intention of talking to either of them. I don't really care what they do for attention just as long as they leave me the hell alone. I also found out some other crazy things. I already mentioned that my egg donor wasn't faithful, but I didn't know just how deep this all ran. She told her husband that my half-siblings aren't his and a lot of other very hurtful things. He had to call the police on her to escort her off his property because she started assaulting him. Tony followed up with me this morning. Yes, he is divorcing her. His lawyers are drafting up his papers within the next week or so and told me that she confessed that I was the product of a long-term affair she was having while my father was still alive. That left me extremely stumped and shocked. But at least I'm able to tackle solace in the fact that my egg donor's life is falling apart. You see, after finding out Tony is getting papers, she has tried to backpedal. She has been calling my aunt begging for her to convince Tony not to do this or else she will be homeless. She has been trying to call Tony and his family, but they all have been ignoring her. Yet, this wasn't enough for my egg donor. She knows my aunt's work schedule and tried to come over to assault me. My cousin was with me still, so she couldn't get in. But hearing her scream at me, some of my very low insecurities hurt and I started to have a panic attack. She tried to actually break the door down but was unable and left. Later that day, I got a call from my half-sister. She tried apologizing on behalf of our egg donor and then had the nerve to ask if I could watch my nieces while her and her husband go on a trip. I love my nieces and nephews, but I told her that she could go F herself. If she wanted me to watch her nieces, then she would have to ask through my aunt. Speaking of my aunt, her and my cousin are currently packing up Alex's things and dropping them off at a buddy of his. His name is Kyle and he's been helping me through all of this as well. He dropped off my favorite fruit this morning to my aunt. He also assured me that I can talk to him anytime. I asked him if he would be in further communication with Alex and he said no. He's just holding on to his things until his parents can pick them up. I really appreciate him.